Thank you. Ja, شيء ما عندك تحكيني نشيا نانش أجد تحكيني نشلو أزشلنا باشتشين طبعا هذا شيء عادو أشي هي باشنالة look Nasha. Hello, my name is Amanda Tachine. I'm Navajo, originally from Ganado, Arizona, a rural town located on the Navajo Nation. I'm Zuni, Red Running Into Water Clan, born for the Mini Goats Clan. My paternal grandfather's clan is Water's Edge, and my paternal grandfather's clan is Salt. I am extremely thrilled and full of gratitude that you are joining us on today's webinar that is focused on preparing American Indian students for college and career readiness. Many of you will agree with me that this is a very important topic that too often does not get the attention it deserves. I want to thank Regional Educational Laboratory, Midwest, for bringing us together today. The title of my presentation is from Babakiri High School, a public school located on the Tohono-O'odham Nation that enrolls and graduates a large number of Native students. The statement, as you can see on the slide, strengthening our sovereign nation, is posted in a visible place at the high school. It is a powerfully culturally relevant message that speaks to our efforts to increase opportunities for Native students. In this discussion, I will briefly share some history, provide social cultural context that are facing Native communities, and touch on culturally responsive schooling as a means toward advancing our work and preparing Native students for the future. Next slide, please. It is a delicate balance to portray the complex realities of diverse Native communities. I want to stress that Native peoples are vastly diverse and should not be generalized or essentialized to reflect a monolithic imagery. Native peoples represent a thriving people who have withstood and continue to withstand colonization and oppressive injustices. I strive to follow Dr. Malia Villega's perspective to telling our stories with love, by not only presenting data that often conjures deficit orientation, but also sheds light on today's conditions that are intimately connected to societal economic context that is rooted in historical United States policies. Next slide. In 2014, former President Barack Obama stated, Native youth and Native education are in a state of emergency. It is fair to say that Natives have been in a state of emergency since colonization. Next slide. At a national level, Native students have a 68% high school graduation rate, a 53% graduation rate for those attending rural Indian education schools. When we review Native high school graduation rates in the Midwest and Central states, we can see variations, with Indiana at 84%, which is above the national rates at 82% for all students, and South Dakota at 47%. I encourage you, if you don't know already, to take a look at your state, school district, institution, organization, and see what the numbers tell you for Native students. First, ask yourself, do we collect this data? And if so, how do we collect this data? And then ask yourself, what other measurements are missing that can tell us a more loving understanding of Native experiences? Next slide. Of those Native students that do graduate from high school, 20% will go on to college. The immediate college enrollment rate for high school completers was 40% in 2015 for all children. For American Indian Alaskan Native students, that rate is nearly half at 23%. And when you look at the graph presented for American Indian and Alaskan Native students, they had the largest decline from 2010 and 2015. We know that the economic recession occurred and that college tuition rates increased during that same period, which may speak to some of that decline. This may be true, but we need to do more research to investigate this further. Next slide, please. As the general Native population increased from 2000 to 2010 by 39%, college enrollment and degrees conferred in that same period remained at 1%. This illustrates a 1% stagnation crisis. Next slide. Let me be clear. When viewing these data sets and raw numbers without understanding the context is very problematic. There is a tendency to place the spotlight on the individual Native student and dismiss the larger historical and societal structures that are intimately at play. Next slide. And then there's another challenge to large data sets. Too often, Native peoples are represented with an asterisk, which denotes the invisibility of Native representation in educational conversations, because their numbers are so small that many argue they cannot be studied. Scholars such as Dr. Heather Schotten, Dr. Stephanie Waterman, and Shelley Lowe are asserting that more work is needed to move beyond the asterisk. Next slide. And in moving beyond the asterisk, we must assert that history and social cultural context matters. I will briefly touch upon these areas, and I encourage you to explore more to better understand the complexity surrounding Native education. Next slide. These maps show the transfer of Native land to the federal government from 1850 to 1990. The red portions indicate lands held by Native peoples. It's important to note here that the maps do not demonstrate the important connection and dimensions between Native identity and their belonging to an environment and place. When working with Native peoples, it's imperative that a deeper awareness of indigeneity and land be understood and acknowledged. Next slide. Between the years of 1787 and 1871, more than 150 treaties were signed and entered into by the federal government and Native nations. This established a trust relationship wherein which the U.S. government and trade for appropriating land were responsible for the social well-being of Native peoples. Among the combination of trust responsibilities, education was included in treaty agreements. Next slide. It's important to note that the federal government implies tribal sovereignty, but tribal nations believe that sovereignty is inherent. In 1942, Felix Cohen, the author of Federal Indian Law, wrote, "Indian sovereignty is the principle that those powers which are lawfully vested in Indian country are not in general delegated powers granted by express acts of Congress, but rather inherent powers of a sovereignty which has never been extinguished." Next slide. During the late 1800s, the motto, "Save the Man, Kill the Indian," propagated by Richard Pratt, illustrated Eurocentric ideals to educate Native people. Boarding schools were established to educate and assimilate Native children into Eurocentric standards. Countless Native children endured trauma, abuse, illness, and death at these boarding schools. Dr. Shanina Lomowaima and others have written extensively of this period. And Dr. Lomowaima and Dr. Teresa McCarty's book titled "To Remain an Indian, Lessons in Democracy from a Century of Native American Education," they stated, "Native reminiscences of boarding school life are full of tears shed in private." Next slide. There is much to learn and discuss regarding the history of Native peoples. The very brief history that I shared with you sets the backdrop of the social cultural context of today. I'm going to transition and talk about the social conditions facing many Native peoples today. Let me remind you here that the data I will share with you are interconnected and linked to systemic constraints rooted in historical and current politics. Nationally, in 2015, the median household income from Native populations was at $38,000 compared to $55,000 for the United States. 28% of Natives live below the poverty level, which is double the national average of 14%. 35% of Native children under 18 live in poverty compared to 21% for all and 12% for whites. Next slide. The national Native unemployment rate is 12%, double the national rate of 6%. However, unemployment is not a clear picture because it measures a person's effort to seek jobs that are assumed to already exist. For many Native peoples who reside on rural reservations, job availability is scarce and difficult to access. Moreover, poverty rates are at much higher rates in rural reservations, with some areas with rates that are 4 times the national average. Research has proven that higher educational attainment levels are related to economic gains. Recall the previous slides at the beginning of this presentation where I described educational attainment levels across demographics? When students do not complete high school and receive a college degree, the ability to gain employment is more challenging. Next slide. I wanted to also include in this discussion health concerns because health, our well-being is also linked to educational outcomes. Among Native youth 10 to 19 years old, type 2 diabetes is nearly 3 times the national average and 5 times higher than among white youth. Native youth are more likely to have used an illegal drug, smoked cigarettes, and participated in binge drinking in the past 30 days than any other racial ethnic group. Next slide. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for Native youth. These statistics are really difficult to swallow, but are the reality of what many of our Native youth are facing. Historical trauma, defined by Mary Yellow Horse Braveheart, is a cumulative emotional and psychological wounding over the lifespan and across generations, emanating from massive group trauma experiences, has been referred to explain the challenges Natives are facing today. Some scholars have critiqued that historical trauma fails to recognize existing structural factors that contribute to current problems, as well as minimizes the strengths of Native people. I want to point out here that systemic poverty and structural forces influence the well-being of people. Next slide. Some structural barriers may include suspension, expulsion, and threats that are occurring in school settings. Native youth, males specifically, are more likely to be expelled from school and have a higher rate of being threatened or injured with a weapon or on school property. And these statistics do not get any better when we discuss those that go to prison. Native Americans are incarcerated at a rate 38% higher than the national average. Native men are incarcerated at 4 times the rate of white men, and Native women are incarcerated at 6 times the rate of white women. Next slide. Racism, marginalization, stereotypes, and oppression, invisibility are all being experienced by Native students right now at schools, neighborhoods, streets, college campuses, playgrounds, in our backyards, and on our televisions and internet. All of these are compounded barriers that are shaping Native students every single day. Next slide. Yet, much hope lies ahead for us. You will learn more about specific examples by Tammy Johnson as she shares her work within the Minneapolis Public Schools. What I will do is briefly talk about that hope and possibility, specifically when culture-responsive schooling is employed. Next slide. Many of us can agree with Alaskan Native Okako, Leona Okako. She states, "To me, educating a child means equipping him or her with the capability to succeed in the world he or she will live in. Education is more than book learning, it is value learning. And this idea of value learning is a vital aspect of culturally responsive education, wherein which we place prominence in the values of Indigenous peoples and our efforts, particularly when engaging in college planning and practice." Next slide. Culturally responsive education recognizes, respects, and uses students' identities and backgrounds as meaningful sources for creating optimal learning environments. Having a firm grounding in the culture of Indigenous students helps to identify the appropriate qualities and practices implemented. Responsive is action-oriented, and that taking actions to address Indigenous students' needs are at the forefront. This may be taking a change in how we typically do our work. Culturally responsive education provides opportunities to learn more about the students and their lives and be flexible, adaptable, creative in the process. This also may mean more time is needed to prepare, think through, and implement practices and teachings. Next slide. Being culturally responsive is more than being respectful, empathetic, or sensitive. Accompanying actions such as having high expectations for students and ensuring that these expectations are realized are what make a difference. This means believing in Native students' capacity and abilities to be their best selves, whether that is going to college or the workforce. In some of the research that I have conducted, high-achieving Native students express frustrations with the schools they attended because their schools do not challenge them or even talk to them about college possibilities. They share that schools are in a deficit mindset and focus too often upon getting students to graduate from high school rather than placing attention on preparing them to go to college. Next slide. Dr. Angelina Castaldo, empirical research has found remarkable gains when culturally responsive schooling are woven into the educational outcomes. Native students have enhanced self-esteem, develop healthy identity formations, are more self-directed and politically active, have a positive influence on their tribal communities, and achieve academically at higher rates. In Dr. Angelina Castagno and Dr. Brian Brabow's article titled Culturally Responsive Schooling for Indigenous Youth, a review of the literature, they discussed that 3 topics are not mentioned in much of the college culturally responsive schooling: sovereignty, racism, and epistemologies. And that in moving forward, we must incorporate and acknowledge sovereignty, racism, and epistemologies in our research and practice. Next slide. In this work, we must keep in mind the following. Recognize the error of viewing learners to one-dimensional generalizations. For example, viewing all Native students as silent and shy, this is not always true. And we must strive to see the multi-dimensional perspectives, behaviors, and attitudes of Native students. We must not focus too much attention on the student, or in some cases, the subject, the program, the class, but also focus on the larger systems: teachers, administrators, school and educational norms, tribal, state, and federal policies. This is a good reminder because much of the work that we do, this is me included, is focused on our efforts in the classroom or in the program that we are running. This is all good work that we are striving to do at the ground level, but we need to also be vigilant about looking at the larger structural policies. Cultural responsive education allows us to learn more about the students we serve. Do not teach our children our culture. Use our culture to teach them is an important reminder for all of us. Next slide. For the work that we do in college and career pathways, we must consider history and social cultural context matters. Consider how you are utilizing that knowledge to inform your programming and planning. This means doing homework, your homework. Learn about the historical background of the Native students that you are working with. Be informed about societal conditions impacting their lives by reading tribal papers and getting connected to tribal-specific social media feeds. It means being invited and going and attending local community events and taking the time and interest to build and foster relationships with community members and organizations. How are you utilizing cultural responsive approaches in college and career readiness? This may mean having conversations with Native students and their families, listening to their thoughts about college and career readiness. Take the time to use that information to strengthen that work, and then return to the students and families again to see if you're addressing and meeting their needs and interests. Incorporate sovereignty, epistemologies, and acknowledgement of racism in college and career readiness activities, goals, and services. There are great programs like College Horizons, American Indian College Fund's Native College Pathways, and University of Colorado Boulder's Upward Bound program that are incorporating culturally responsiveness in their practices. These programs are asserting the message to Native college-going students that education is a means towards strengthening our sovereign nation. And that message, at the title of this presentation, in of itself is an example of being culturally responsive. Next slide, and final slide. If we want to do better as a nation for our Native students, we must stress that students will learn better and be more engaged in schooling when they can make connections to it. Actually, have.
Thank you, Amanda. You covered a lot of information, which we really appreciate. We did get a couple of questions, and if we, as you have some questions, to those of you that are participating, feel free to enter them into the chat window. One of the earlier questions was actually on what ideas you have and suggestions for how to reduce the high suicide rate among Native American males.
I thank you for addressing that question. That is a topic actually that's been pressing on my heart over the last few years. And so I've been doing some of my own learning. I think one of the things too is really learning to some great people that are doing that work and being familiarized with it. Trying to recall his name. In Alaska, they're launching right now a film that's going to come out about Native youth suicide. And they're doing some really great work up there in Alaska addressing suicide. And much of what I'm understanding is really including cultural responsive ways of knowing and instilling strength within and the youth there in that area. And so my recommendation is, and this is what I'm doing too, is really learning more about it because it's a really heavy subject and it's really hard to grapple with, but it's happening in our communities and our families. And so when I did speak with, and if I think of his name and it comes to my head, I'll put it in the chat box. I spoke with him privately after his keynote address. He spoke at the Racial Ethnic National Conference, the NCORE conference. And I shared with him, how do you do this work? Kind of what you asked me. And he said, you know, it's important that if we're going to engage in this work as professionals, as family members, is that we also get strong in heart and mind as well, because it is really it's even hard to talk about it, especially within our communities. And so that's something that I'm taking to heart is, you know, getting stronger in my faith and my spirituality and preparing for that work. Great question. Thank you for opening it up.
No problem. So we have a few other questions, and this one transitions a little bit, and we have another question that will transition back a little bit on the suicide, but we're going to take a little bit of a break on that and then come back to it. So one of our participants asked if there are local or statewide initiatives that structure pathways for Native students between high school and college and between tribal community colleges and four-year institutions.
So are there programs, like national programs?
Local or statewide?
Programs. There are some, I mentioned a few programs that are out there. So College Horizon, for example, I don't know if you're familiar with it. If you're not, they do a really great job nationally. Then they go throughout the nation at different states throughout the year. And it's a summer enrichment program for Native high school students to actually do the whole application process. And I follow them on social media, and they do such a fabulous job. And I've noticed within it, particularly this year, they've done a lot of great work, culturally responsive ways of knowing in their programming. And in that, for example, they talk about encountering racism on college campuses. And I think that's unique because often those are the conversations we don't have in our planning and preparation. It's not something we want to talk about. We wish that it wasn't an area of a concern, but it's the reality of what our students face often when they go on college campuses. So they talk about those kinds of topics there. And so I would definitely encourage you to like their Facebook, their social media site, and share that. with your students. Another one that is emerging to us out of the American Indian College Fund is the Native College Pathways that I mentioned, and they are doing some fabulous social media work as well, and they work primarily with tribal college students, engaging high school students to be in tribal college, to attend tribal college. And they do some fun videos where they actually have students who are going to tribal colleges do tours and video cam it. And so it's pretty cool because you get the students' perspective of a tour on a campus. And they not only do that, but they talk about different topics that are important, like financial aid and so forth. But they do it and tailored in a way that they speak to a Native student audience. So off the top of my head, those are two programs that I'd like to re-share.
And I'm going to have just enough information to get dangerous, but there's also a program in Alaska. I believe it's with University of Alaska. I can't remember if it's Anchorage or Fairbanks. Slightly different, where they're actually trying to set aside housing for students, where Native American students are getting intentionally placed with their peers rather than being spread out among the kind of all of the students that are going to be in residential. So they're setting up essentially residential houses that are specific to different tribal students. And so they're able to have that additional support. And then they're also mentoring and asking someone who's been through the school to kind of be the host mom or host kind of RA, so to connect and to continue the cultural aspect for students once they're at school, knowing that that can be a big adjustment for Native American students. We did have a question about if, Amanda, you were trying to, or referring to Evan Peter from NCORE.
Yes, thank you, yes.
So one of our participants was able to kind of fill that in for us. And another participant, oh great, you guys are doing such a great job, thank you so much. Actually put in the chat box the link to the American Indian College Fund's Native Pathway to College. So we've got that link in the chat box for everybody. So it seems like we've got to move on to our next presentation. So keep your questions, and we've got time. We've got another block of time, everyone. So we're writing them down. I have them right here. But with this, thank you, Amanda. We'll bring you back for the next question and answer. We're going to transition now for Tammy Johnson to talk more specifically about some of the work that's happening in Minneapolis. So Tammy, thank you so much for joining us, and here you go.